Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling a really fascinating intersection, the growing ties between India and Mexico.
That's right.
Specifically looking at how Indian migration and, well, businesses are shaping Mexican livelihoods.
Mm-hmm.
You sent in a fantastic collection of articles, data, lots of stuff. And our mission really is to understand the central question. What's the actual impact of this growing Indian presence on Mexico's economy?
Yeah, and what does it mean for the people there?
Exactly. What are the tangible benefits and maybe the challenges for the people living there? We're going to try and unpack both the numbers and, the human stories behind them, get a clearer picture.
Absolutely. And the material, it really paints a compelling picture of a dynamic situation. It's quite something.
It is.
What's particularly interesting, I think, is seeing how these big global economic trends are playing out, like right on the ground level in Mexico.
Creating opportunities, but also friction?
Yeah, opportunities and some, understandable friction.
Okay, so to really get a handle on the present, let's maybe step back first. Look at Mexico's economic landscape before this big wave of Indian migration, say, pre-2010.
Good idea. Context is key here.
What were the main pillars back then, based on what you saw?
Well, looking at the economic data from that time, you see a strong reliance on a few key sectors.
Right.
The automotive industry was huge, right? Ford, General Motors, big employers.
Right.
Then you had Pemex, the state-owned oil giant, a massive force.
Still is, in many ways.
True, but its dominance profile was maybe different then. And agriculture, of course. Always foundational for Mexico.
Okay, and for the folks working in those big sectors, manufacturing especially, what were the wages like? What was a typical day's pay?
So the INEGI data from around then suggests typical daily wages in manufacturing were somewhere around $8.
$8 a day.
Per day, yeah. It gives us a really important benchmark, to understand the economic reality many Mexicans faced before this recent influx.
Definitely. And grounding this in people's lives, we came across Carlos's story, a 58-year-old former auto worker.
Ah, yes. His quote was quite striking.
It really was. He said, "We built cars for Americans, then factories moved to India, and now Indians are here." Wow. It captures so much change in one breath.
It really does. It speaks volumes, doesn't it?
Yeah.
About that feeling of being caught up in global shifts where jobs just move continents.
Yeah, impacting communities in such profound ways. And it wasn't just the economy that looked different then. Culturally, what were the big influences before this stronger Indian connection?
That's a crucial point, too. Culturally, the dominant forces were largely, Latin American, especially telenovelas, right?
Go with it.
And naturally, influence from the U.S. Hollywood movies were huge.
So that sets the stage for the cultural changes we're seeing now.
Precisely.
Okay, let's pivot then to the Indian impact, as we're calling it. The data shows a pretty sharp increase in Indian firms in Mexico.
It really does. Doubled since 2015. That's according to the Embassy of India figures you shared.
Doubled. Why Mexico, do you think? What's the draw for Indian businesses lately?
Well, several things probably. Mexico's location is obviously a huge plus, right next door to the U.S. market.
Absolutely, yeah.
Trade agreements help to simplify things. And maybe labor costs are more competitive for some Indian companies compared to, say, setting up in the U.S. directly or other regions.
Makes sense. A mix of factors.
Add that to India's own growing economic power globally, and you see why they're expanding.
And the sectors they're investing in. It's quite focused, isn't it? IT is big.
Very big. TCS, Infosys, major players setting up shop.
Pharma too, right? Dr. Reddy's was mentioned.
Yep. And automotive continues, interestingly, with companies like Tata getting involved.
So these are areas where India has, serious global expertise.
Exactly. It's a natural extension for these Indian multinationals looking for new markets, new growth opportunities.
And these investments mean jobs. The estimate was over 50,000 jobs created by Indian firms.
That's the headline number, yes.
Which sounds great on the surface, a real boost. But are there nuances, things we need to dig into under that number?
Yes, definitely. And the story of Priya, that entrepreneur in Monterrey, it kind of highlights both sides.
Right.
She hired 100 Mexicans, which is fantastic. But she said, we hired 100 Mexicans, but need engineers who speak English.
Ah. Right, the skills gap issue.
Exactly. It points to this potential mismatch where maybe the local workforce doesn't always have the specific skills, including language, that these global companies need for certain roles.
Which leads directly into some of the concerns raised. That Hardley report from 2023.
Yeah, that was eye-opening.
It said 60% of Indian tech firms in Mexico hire over half their staff from India for specialized roles.
60% hiring over 50% Indian staff for those roles.
What exactly does specialized roles usually mean in tech, and why is it harder for locals to fill them?
Well, specialized often means needing very specific tech expertise, maybe certain certifications or deep experience with niche software or systems.
Yep.
And like Priya mentioned, English skills are often key, right? Because these projects are often global, coordinating with teams elsewhere. Communication becomes critical.
Which then connects to that other statistic, Mexican software engineers facing, 20% more competition?
Yeah, for the higher paying jobs specifically.
So it's not just about the number of jobs overall, but about access to the better jobs for skilled Mexicans.
Precisely. When you have an influx of foreign workers, especially filling roles local talent might aspire to, it can, increase competition. It might even put downward pressure on wages in the specific fields.
And we heard from Luis, the coder. His quote was powerful.
It really brought it home, didn't it?
Yeah. I trained for years. Now Indians get visas for my dream job. It highlights the frustration, that feeling of being shut out.
Luis's experience really underscores a critical point. It makes you think about immigration policies, visas.
Are they balanced?
Right. Are they considering the impact on the local workforce properly, ensuring fair shots for domestic talent? These are tough questions.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly, because it's not just about jobs and the economy, is it?
Not at all.
This interaction is definitely changing Mexico's cultural landscape, too.
Absolutely. And there are clear signs of growing interest, even adoption, of Indian culture.
Like yoga.
Like yoga, yeah. The Yoga Alliance reported a 200% increase in practitioners in Mexico since 2010.
200%. That's huge.
It's a massive cultural shift in, just over a decade?
And it's not just yoga. Bollywood seems to be making real inroads.
It really does. The stat was that Bollywood films now outperform half of Mexican cinema releases in urban areas.
Half. That's incredible. Why do you think it's so popular? The music, the stories.
I think it's probably a mix. Bollywood often has these universal themes, love, family, drama. They resonate anywhere.
Sure.
Plus the sheer spectacle, the music, the dancing. It's a very different vibe from Hollywood or local cinema. And good distribution helps, I'm sure.
We even heard from Anna in Mexico City. What did she say?
Yes. I learned Hindi to understand Shah Rukh Khan.
That's amazing. It shows real dedication, a genuine connection people are feeling.
It's a fantastic example, isn't it, of positive cultural exchange. People getting genuinely interested, even learning a language. That's appreciation.
But alongside that appreciation, that attraction, there were also reports of tension brewing.
It's not all smooth sailing.
We saw that quote from the protester in Guadalajara. It was quite blunt.
It was. They buy our land, hire their own. Is this still Mexico?
Yeah, that really captures a sense of unease, maybe even resentment in some parts of the population.
And that quote, it really gets to the heart of the anxieties that can come with globalization and migration, doesn't it?
Definitely. Worries about identity, about competition, about whether your own community is losing out.
Exactly. When people feel their way of life or their opportunities are under threat, even if the overall economic picture is complex, you're going to see pushback.
So thinking about the future, how can Mexico navigate this? These complex currents, economic and cultural. The materials mention some potential solutions, policy ideas.
Yes, and it's interesting to look at how other places handle similar things. Canada, for instance.
What do they do?
Well, the example given was Canada mandating 50% local hiring for foreign firms in some contexts.
50% local hires. Wow.
It raises the question, right? Could something like that, maybe tailored for Mexico, work? Could it help ensure more jobs go directly to Mexicans?
It's a tough one. On one hand, yeah, it could force companies to invest more in local training, hire more locals. But on the other, could it scare off investment? If companies feel too restricted, finding that balance seems crucial.
It's always the balancing act. Policy needs careful thought to avoid, unintended consequences.
There was also mention of a Tech for Todos bill.
Right, aimed specifically at training Mexicans for the kinds of jobs Indian tech firms are creating.
That sounds more targeted, maybe? Addressing that skills gap we talked about?
It does seem like a proactive approach, investing in your own workforce so they can compete for those jobs.
Makes sense. The challenge, I guess, is making sure those programs are effective, accessible, and actually teach the skills the companies need right now.
Absolutely. Implementation is everything.
And it's not all conflict or problems. We should remember the positive example, too. That joint venture.
Ah, the textiles, yes. The sari-inspired rebozos.
Such a cool idea. An Indian-Mexican venture creating something totally new by blending traditions.
It's a beautiful example, actually. Shows that collaboration, blending expertise, creating shared value, it is possible.
It really suggests there's potential for real synergy, not just friction.
It does. And I think ultimately the big takeaway here is probably about finding that balance.
Balance, yeah.
Globalization, foreign investment, they bring benefits, no doubt, but it's critical that those benefits are shared fairly.
And that Mexico protects its own workforce's interests.
Right. Mexico, like any country really, needs to figure out how to welcome investment, but also prioritize its own people.
Yeah.
Through smart policies, through developing local talent. It can't just reject investment, but it needs fair terms.
So, this whole deep dive, it really shows how complex this relationship is. Indian migration, businesses in Mexico. It's reshaping things in so many ways.
Absolutely.
We've seen the economic shifts, the jobs which are real, but also those very real concerns about who benefits most, about displacement.
And the cultural side, too. This embrace of things like Bollywood and yoga happening right alongside this undercurrent of unease about identity and change.
It's definitely multifaceted.
And stepping back, looking at the bigger picture, Mexico's situation is such a valuable case study.
How so?
Well, it shows us how different countries are grappling with this interconnected world. How do you balance attracting foreign money and companies with, the fundamental need to support your own people, your own workers?
And preserve your cultural identity at the same time.
Exactly. It's this incredibly delicate, ongoing balancing act. And what's happening in Mexico right now gives us some really compelling food for thought on how those dynamics play out. It makes you wonder, how will other nations manage this same puzzle?